Have you ever felt like the more things you have, the less satisfying it all feels? Like you thought at some point in your life you were going to finally acquire enough things to, I'm satisfied. But then you found out that sometimes the management of those things and the maintenance of those things and the just being all stuck up in your head with those things didn't really give you the feeling that you thought. Psychology calls it buyer's remorse when we buy something and then almost immediately have that regret. Like we drive off the lot with a brand new car and then we start worrying about, oh no, what if a hailstorm hits? Or, oh no, what if a bug hits it? Or, oh no, what if I hit the curb? And instantly we start having those regrets. Maybe real growth doesn't come from acquiring a lot of stuff in this life, but it comes from letting go. We want to find fulfillment. We all seem to be on this journey of finding what our purpose is. What is life really all about? And unfortunately, a lot of the answers that we are handed or the templates of people's lives that we see as popularized in culture and in media don't line up with what actually drives those feelings of happiness, fulfillment, and purpose. Some of the most wealthy people in our world who have acquired the most stuff have some of the most tragic, terrifying personal lives that we would never want to happen. And yet we disconnect ourselves from that because we think, well, surely it would be different for me. The reality is, chasing after stuff and adding more things to the calendar don't actually ever equal fulfillment, happiness, or purpose. The opposite happens so many times. And so in this series, we're looking at 4 different ways that we can grow spiritually from the teachings of Jesus. And actually, sometimes these ways that Jesus teaches us seem to conflict with what we've seen in other people's lives or what we popularly believe in culture to be the way, or even the path we're on right now. But Jesus invites us to course correct. It's kind of like when you know you're going in a wrong direction. Has anybody ever gotten wrong directions and you just keep going and you keep going and you think, surely there's going to be a turnoff up here and I'm going to finally get there. And eventually, at some point, you finally convince yourself, okay, this is ridiculous. I've gone 20 miles in the wrong direction. I've got to flip a U-turn and go back and figure out where I went wrong. And when we are able to course correct earlier, we find a lot more happiness in those decisions. We're like, okay, I'm not going to be hard-headed about this. I'm going to turn around because I'm going the wrong direction. Well, unfortunately, in this life, sometimes we will go a whole career or 20 or 30 years in the wrong direction, thinking at some point this has got to pay off. This madness has got to pay off. And we don't listen to those people who came before us that tell us, I wish I had done things differently. There's not been anyone that retired that ever said, man, I wish I'd spent more hours at the office. I wish I'd put more things on the calendar away from my family. Never, ever has anyone written that down. And yet, so many times, we put things in the way of actual growth and the deep kind of contentment that we learn about in the life of Christ. So today, we're going to look at something that doesn't strike us as the answer right off the bat. And that is the idea of giving away or letting go of some things in our life. Generosity and serving others. Using our time, our talent, and our treasure wisely, instead of just focusing on gathering more. And we begin today with our key teaching from Jesus in the book of Matthew. And here Jesus says it like this. He says, don't store up treasures here on earth. Don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. So he sets up the negative case first. He says, don't do this. And then he's going to show us what to do instead. So first of all, he says, look, all the stuff you can get on this earth is going to be eventually dust or eaten by moths or rusted out. It's all temporary. And even if you're able to somehow hold on to it for a little bit, thieves will come and steal those things. And anything a common thief can take away from you is not really that valuable. He says, do this instead. Very next verse. Store your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. Isn't it interesting? He says, where your treasure is, that's where your heart already is. Like, that's where it is. You can say one thing, but we can quickly check your work, right? We can check your math on that. And you can do that yourself. Don't lie to yourself, essentially, is what he's giving us a rule for here. Like, whatever you are really passionate about, that's where your treasures are being put right now. And does that change throughout our life? Well, of course it does. But he's inviting us to not focus our life on collecting and storing and protecting and dusting these things. He's inviting us to invest our life in loving God and loving his creation, loving people, doing good for them. I remember when I was in basketball and I had a coach kind of get me around the neck. You know, it wasn't like abusive, but it was pretty close, right? It was right on that line. Got me around the neck, the back of my neck, and he said, Frailey, where is your head? Because it's certainly not in this game. And then I sat out the rest of that season, I think, most of the time. I was on what was called third string, and that's not a good string when you're on a Class A basketball team. That's like there really isn't a third string. It's just you're just kind of at the end of the row there. Where's your head? It's not in this game. I wonder sometimes if God is frustrated with us, and he's like, "Where is your heart? Where is your heart at?" Because it's not in what I've got going on. You've put it in what some guru says out there, or some speaker, or some book you read, or some celebrity you see that you admire, but your heart's not in the game I have invited you to. And I wonder what that would look like if we could jump into what we've been invited to be a part of and really put our heart and our head into this idea of heaven instead of here. You know, here is really important to us and sometimes overly important. And so what would it look like to grow in this way? Now, this is growth that not many people are challenging you to. This is growth that no one's really putting out there. Everyone's just pretty much focused on you, and collect and gather, and that seems to be the way. And so when Jesus teaches these ideas, they are very countercultural. They sound odd at first. And that's exactly why at some point in us, they kind of ring true. Because we go, yeah, this kind of hits home. You see, I think at the end of the day, giving is one of those things that really accelerates our spiritual growth. And it does it in a very quick manner. It doesn't take a long time for generosity to change us. For as soon as I start blessing someone else, all of a sudden, a couple things happen. Everyone knows that giving to others makes you feel good. This is why Salvation Army runs commercials and why, even the little animal commercials on TV or the commercials to help out people in a natural disaster. People that are not connected to Jesus in any way are doing these kind of things and getting people on board for at least a short period of time, because in every single one of us, the way you've been designed is that generosity does something. Sometimes we call it the warm fuzzies. Sometimes we call it an overwhelming feeling of goodness or wholesomeness. But at the end of the day, the fact that you were created to be generous is because you've been created in the image of God. And it strikes at something that goes beyond the way you were raised and where you were raised and how the people were in your life. It goes beyond what you're currently involved in. It goes to a core level of your creation. That's why it feels good to give. It feels good to help others. It feels good to serve one another. It strikes at something at our very core level. Now, I would argue it's difficult to sustain that. It's why when you get things from a nonprofit and you give to a nonprofit, you'll get 1 million pieces of mail that next year. You ever had that experience? You're like, I think they're spending more on the mailing pieces than I gave them this year. I mean, I just get so many mailings. And so it's difficult to maintain unless you start to key in on, this isn't just part of feeling good. It's a part of my values. It's a part of my identity. It's a part of my growth spiritually. Because not only does it make me feel good to give, but it stretches me. It grows me. And I get to see a different purpose and fulfillment in my life that nothing I buy can do. I mean, I think I heard a comedian one time say, you've never seen anybody sat on a jet ski. So he said, you're just always out there smiling when you're on a jet ski. He said, money can buy happiness. I remember hearing him say that. I thought that was funny. But the reality is, anything we buy, whether it's a speedboat, whether it's a speedboat or it's something, that woke everybody up, or it's something that, an electronic item, or it's a fancy piece of jewelry, all those things we buy, we have in mind how it's going to make me feel, right? All of us have in mind how that's going to make me feel. But how many times does it actually do that long term? Maybe initially, maybe at the first. So many times disappointment. It's why you find things that were thousands of dollars going on Facebook Marketplace for pennies on the dollar. People trying to offload these things because they're like, it didn't have the desired effect. It just didn't live up to its billing. Giving accelerates our spiritual growth. Money and hoarding money, on the other hand, does not accelerate our spiritual growth. If I were to mention the guy's name, Warren Buffett, some of you know who Warren Buffett is, right? You've heard of this guy. He's a very famous investor. He is well known for making good investments, and so he's a billionaire, and yet he lives in a very modest home, drives very modest vehicles, did not give his wealth away in his will and everything to all of his kids. He instead has been giving a lot of it away to nonprofits to do good. But Buffett has this thing called the jerk doctrine that I think is hilarious and accurate. And it goes like this. He says, of the billionaires I have known, money just brings out the basic traits in them. If they were jerks before they had money, they are simply jerks with $1 billion. I like that. Because a lot of us think of maybe some of you are too young to remember this, but the Beverly Hillbillies. And the Beverly Hillbillies, the concept was they were hillbillies, and Jed's out there hunting, I think, and shoots, and oil springs up, and they start to get rich because there's oil found on their land, and so they move to Beverly Hills. And so the joke is, that it doesn't really change their nature. They were hillbillies in the mountains, and they're hillbillies in Beverly and Hills. And so there's kind of a truth to that we get. That money, stuff, acquisition doesn't actually change our nature. And that's my point. Money doesn't drive purpose. Money doesn't drive happiness. Money doesn't drive you feeling fulfilled in life. Look at Bill Gates, Microsoft, right? One of the most wealthy guys in the world, and what is he now doing with his wealth? He reached the end of it, and he's like, I'm going to give it away. So now he's just, and Buffett is the same way, just giving away because they acquired. They followed that maze. They found the cheese at the end of the maze, and it wasn't the fulfillment they were looking for. Now, why we don't learn that, why we can't learn that, I don't know. But the guys that have followed the maze to the end have clearly told us this isn't what it's all about. Generosity, on the other hand, can shape us for the better. And Jesus is clear about it. That's why Jesus is putting this paradigm out 2,000 years ago. Store it up here, and it's going to rot away, or it's going to rot you. Store it up in heaven, those treasures last forever. So what does that look like? How can we practically do that? So I want to spend the rest of our time giving a few examples and just some stuff for you to chew on of ways that you could live this out. The first way is to partner with a local church, and I think that is a crucial endeavor because what we are doing, we have a unique purpose in the community. We have a unique purpose as an organization. While churches do a lot of good things, the uniqueness of what we are doing as far as telling people the good news is very unique. In fact, Paul talks to the Philippian church this way about it. He tells them, every time I think of you, I give my thanks to God. Whenever I pray, I make my requests for all of you with joy, for you have been my partners in spreading the good news about Christ from the time you first heard it until now. It is a unique thing that happens in the early first century where people began to partner together to get out the good news, or what's called the gospel. And the idea was that these churches would be kind of like lighthouses, that no matter what was going on in the culture, and if you think about first century, you've got this horrific Roman culture, very much hedonistic lifestyle, very much focused on negative things, and very much unjust, horrible system for the oppressed people underneath it. And yet you had these little lighthouses that were starting to tell a different story about this Jesus and this hope that goes beyond the here and now, and a different way of seeing the world, and a different way of purpose and fulfillment. And that Jesus had given the ultimate sacrifice so that we could all have access to that. And so Paul goes to this city of Philippi, and he tells this church here, he says, look, I'm so thankful for you because you've partnered with me in this. Ever since you heard the good news, you wanted to be a part of that work. You wanted to be a part of taking this message to those who either hadn't heard it or didn't get it yet. And you wanted to be a part of sharing that. So you've been my partners in doing this. And so Paul thanks them for working with him and being a part of that. Randy Alcorn has written a book, and he said this about it. He said, when you leave this world, will you be known as one who accumulated treasures on earth that you couldn't keep, or will you be recognized as one who invested treasures in heaven that you couldn't lose? Now, on the surface, we go, well, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? I'm either going to invest in things that are just going to slip right through my hands like sand, or I'm going to invest in things that there's no way can ever be taken from me. This, of course, Alcorn is alluding to Jesus' own teaching on this. You store up treasures here, it's going to rot away or be stolen. You store up treasures there, can't rot, can't be stolen. Sure investment, either way, one is assuredly you will lose 100% of it, and the other is assuredly you will save 100% of it. So, it calls us to question our values. What is most valuable? So if I decide to invest my treasures, what I've been entrusted with as a steward for this moment, how do I do that? Like, what is the process for that? And growing up, I remember hearing lots of different ideas, and lots of different religions and churches and Christian different variations have different ideas on this. And some will use the word tithe, and some will use the word generosity or giving. Some will use donation. Some will use gifting. There's just all kinds of different ideas out there. So for us at Coffee Creek, back in 2013, when we started thinking through this, we said, well, how do we want to talk about that? What does that look like? And so we went back and dug in the scriptures, and this was the answer that came most clearly. It was 2 Corinthians 9:7. It says, you must decide in your heart how much to give. And don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure, for God loves a person who gives cheerfully. And so, in my memory, over the last nearly 15 years here, I cannot remember a time that we have used pressure except one time when the air conditioner failed and we were like, please help. It's going to be real hot this summer. But other than that, I don't remember doing any sort of pressure, because we wanted to follow this model as closely as possible to where people gave just out of like their conversation with God. We've always said, you and God have a conversation about what you are to give, and then just be faithful to that. Just do that. Like, give until it feels good. Some people say, give till it hurts. And I'm like, no, give till it feels good. Give because your giving ought to feel good. That's natural. You give to something, you get to see the benefits of those results. That ought to make you feel happy. That ought to make you feel fulfilled. So have a conversation with God. Decide in your heart how much to give. And don't give in response to pressure. Don't give, God loves a cheerful giver. He loves someone that sees the benefits of what they're giving to. And in that way, because if we're emulating God, then in that way, he was a cheerful giver to us. He wasn't like, oh, I guess I'll let these scumbags in. No, he's like, these are my creations. I love them. I want them to be reconciled to me. And so everything that I bless them with, I want them to be happy and fulfilled with. And that brings joy to the Father to see us being reconciled to him. So we have a mission that is very clear here at Coffee Creek. It is to tell every man, woman, and child that God is for them. We want people to hear that. Some hear it for the first time, and they get it. It clicks, and they're like, yes. It triggers something in them that was latent for a long time. Sometimes people hear that, and they don't believe it at first because they've told themselves the story for 20 or 30 years that they're not worth it, that God couldn't love them because of the things they've done or the things they've seen or the things they've said. And they've written a little story that they tell themselves. It's real convenient. Or someone told them that story, that they weren't worth anything as a kid. Or some horrible trauma was inflicted upon them. And so they've owned that their whole life. And then we tell them, hey, God loves you. And he sent Jesus for you. And he wants to welcome you in. You are welcome in here. You're welcome in this family. And it's just unbelievable. They can't believe it. And so it takes more than one time to hear that. It takes what I call here, what we have termed over time here, the percolator method. It takes just dripping a little bit. You know how coffee makes in a coffee maker? Just drip, 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 drip. It takes a long time, process of that, percolation. And eventually, maybe they'll come to a point where they go, light goes off and they go, wow, this story that seems too good to be true is just really good. And that's the bridge we're trying to gap for so many people. The story that seems too good to be true is just really good. That's the good news. And it's not good news if it's not good for every single man, woman, and child in our community. It's good for everyone. But getting folks that have been hurt for a long time, getting folks that have wallered themselves away out of the darkness and into the light of that truth is difficult work. It is not easy work. It is not always fun work. It is messy, but it is worth it when we get to see people say, yes, I get it now. That's the joy of the work. That's the fulfillment of our work. Getting to see your neighbors and your coworkers and your family go from darkness to light, hopelessness to hope. That's the beauty. That's the joy. That's the purpose. That's the fulfillment. And just like that's God's purpose, because you are a creation of God and you know that giving $1 here or there makes you feel good, well, all of a sudden, when you partner in the work of helping men and women move from darkness to light, that triggers something even beyond simple generosity. It triggers something huge in you. So, first concept is that we can give and partner together for the good news. The second one is a big part of that work is serving one another. And how do we serve one another? And what does that look like? And everybody has different talents. So I can't say you have to go do this and you have to go do that and you go do that. It's where you take a critical look at yourself and say, how am I gifted? What are my real skills here? And then you go and you use that time and that talent to bless other people. 1 Peter says it like this, chapter 4, verse 10. Each of us, in listening to that, should use whatever gift you've received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. The very concept here is your skill set, which you may not think much of. I've heard people say, well, I don't have many talents. And they're some of the most talented people in their trade, what they do for work. And connecting that dot between like, oh, I could take that and bless someone with that? Yeah, because look at what the text says here. That's one of the gifts of grace. You could use that as an opportunity to bless someone that maybe can't afford that skill or that talent, or is just clueless compared to that skill or that talent you have, that God has gifted you uniquely. And so whatever gift you've been given, use that to bless others. A way we've said it for a long time, I've used this graphic for years now, at Coffee Creek, is that everyone does the dishes. That everyone can serve a role, but we all are service-minded. That is the concept here. And so I've never asked anyone to do anything at Coffee Creek that I've not first been willing to do myself, and I probably haven't done first myself. Whether that's plunging a toilet or fixing a mess somewhere, I mean, it's just, there's nothing that, except for singing. I know that I've not sung up here before, so I don't think we want to hear that. But everything, or played an instrument, but everything else I've pretty much done and am willing to do. So what does it look like for you to join in on this core value of our church and to say, yeah, it implies action, doesn't it? It's not just agreement. It's not just, that's a great thing the church does. But it says, if you want to be a part here, you want to partner with us, then throw in with us. Don't just observe from the sidelines, but get on the field with us. Let's go. Let's do this together. Let's serve, not just come to be served. And there's a difference there, isn't there? Whether you're coming to be served, you want someone to take care of you like you're at a restaurant, right? And you're snapping your fingers and you've got expectations. Or are you coming in with the towel and you're ready to serve others? And this is an important distinction to make because we live in a very consumer-centered culture. This is the culture that says, let me speak to your manager whenever we have a small amount of upset in our life, right? I want to talk to the manager right now. They're going to hear what I have to say. We feel very entitled to that. But consider the perspective of Christ himself, who the Bible tells us did not come to be served himself. The Son of Man, Jesus, came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus didn't come here looking to be served like a king. He didn't come here to, ride around on those things where the four guys carry you through the streets and everyone lauds you. He didn't come to bust through the line. He didn't even have TSA pre. Thank you. I worked on that one. Jesus came to serve others. That's why it was so offensive to his followers when he got down on the ground and started washing their feet like a commoner. And they were like, you can't wash our feet. I should be washing your feet. And just like, if you don't let me do this, then you don't understand the kingdom of God. And that lesson should translate to us that Jesus himself didn't come to be served, but to serve. And if we want to be like Jesus, then we will enter every space of life with that mindset. I'm not here for others to serve me, but I'm here to be a blessing for them. Now, I can't give my life for many as Jesus did, and I don't have to because Jesus accomplished that on the cross. But what I can do is live my life in a pattern as much as it is within my power to do so, like Jesus. So I serve others and I give generously. Jesus was willing to give us everything. He didn't take all the money in the world or all the power that was offered him in the world. Instead, he chose to give all of that up for you and for me. And that's amazing. Some of you want to be sacrificial, but you struggle. You struggle with finances. We live in a world that's very difficult to balance all of these things. And you may be saying, boy, I would love to do this, but I'm in debt up to my eyeballs, or I just have no grip on my finances. And I want you to know that you're not alone. You're sitting around people who have similar struggles. All of us do. And so we have created some resources for you that are free for you on our website. And I'll email this out to you later. You don't have to worry about writing this down or anything, but we have all kinds of stuff there. There are spreadsheets and templates that will help you get a budget set up. There are over 2 hours of videos of teachings that I've done on this topic. There is a legacy planning, if you want to do that. There's a money map idea there. There are free links to resources of other websites and people that are much smarter than me that have written on this to help out. There's a ton of free resources to get out of debt, to get a budget set up. And then there is a resource there that we link to, and it's one that I always endorse because I have found it very helpful, called EveryDollar. And it's an app or a website you can use to help manage your finances. And it's free in its basic form, but for the premium version, there's an annual subscription for it. But if you sign up today in our app, we're doing a giveaway for a year subscription to that service. And the premium version will automatically connect to your bank and download that, and it helps you tell your money where to go. It's very difficult to be generous if you just hope at the end of the month there's more money than there is month, right? It's a lot easier to be generous and to tell your money where to go if you have some sense of where it's going. The cool thing about this is you don't have to worry about it every month. When you set it up in EveryDollar, and this is through Dave Ramsey, if you're aware of who he is, this is the app that his company came up with. But basically, when you set it up and have a sense of where it's going, you get a picture of what your finances look like. And so you can tell your money where to go instead of just hoping or wishing that you could be generous. That's not a plan. This gives you a plan. So we're doing the giveaway today. It ends, you can join all day long. If you download our church app, you'll get additional entries. You'll get 100 or 50 additional entries for that. So this will operate like all of our giveaways. We're going to give one premium subscription away if you'd like to enter that today. I just wanted to let you know about that. But you can get the app anytime. It's free to everybody. So EveryDollar is the app. At the end of the day, if we want to grow spiritually, we've got to get our heads wrapped around the allocation of the limited resources we've been given. And that's what the word stewardship means. If that word is new to you, that's what stewardship means. You've got to be able to steward, to guide, to wrap your mind around how you can allocate resources. Because all of us have a limited amount of time. We have to sleep, so we have certain hours of the day available. We have to work. We have certain tasks that must be done every day. So we only have a certain amount of hours in our week that we can allocate. I mean, just like church budgets, a certain amount of our money has to go to OG&E. We're a nonprofit, but they come after us just like everybody else, right? They want the money for the lights to stay on and for that electricity for the air conditioners and the heaters. Like, we have certain hard costs that are not flexible, just things we have to pay. Our insurance, things that we just have to pay, curriculum costs, like things that are hard costs. Then we have a little flexibility with certain areas. Just like you have to pay the utility bills. You have to pay for food. You have to pay insurance, taxes. And then you have some flexibility. But if you can't get control of that flexibility part, then it just all goes away quickly, right? It all evaporates. And so to grow, we have to start getting a handle on that. We have to get a handle on our time. We have to get a handle on our talent. And sometimes, like I said, we don't think about our talent. We don't think about how it could bless someone else. If you're good at something, guarantee you there's 50 of us over here who are not good at it, who could really benefit from someone that's good at it, helping them. And so how we allocate those resources we're in charge of, that's what it means to steward. You allocate those resources. To become a good steward means you start to think critically about the allocation of those resources. And ultimately what we want for you is that as you do that, you get a greater sense of what your purpose here is. And you start to walk closer with Jesus. Because Jesus was clear on his purpose from the very beginning. He knew. Everybody around him was confused, but he knew. His purpose was for you and for me. He came for us as a gift to bring us closer to God, to reconcile that broken relationship. For you to have a closer relationship with Jesus, you've got to learn how to trust him, period. That's your only job. Your job's not to figure it all out. Your job's not to be really smart or smart aleck. Usually we choose one of those. That's not your job. Your job's not to be the person that is the best celebrity in the world that everybody wants to love and adore for 5 minutes of fame. Your job is to learn to trust Jesus. And that's difficult to do. I'll give you that. To trust Jesus, sometimes I've found people will trust Jesus instantly with their life, but to trust Jesus with our finances, ooh, ouch. To trust Jesus with our time, ouch. That gets hard. But that's a big part of what it means to trust Jesus. And becoming a generous person is a path to an enhanced relationship with Jesus. Trusting Jesus is not just a phrase. We want for you to be able to really trust in Jesus.